Hi, I'm David Fox, Executive Director at Arm & Arm, and welcome to This Is Home, a celebration of a triumph of humanity even through difficult times. First of all, I want to thank everybody who helped us this year navigate through all of the crises caused by the pandemic. Also, tonight we're going to be educated as you'll listen to an interview from Pulitzer Prize winning author Matthew Desmond, who will talk about the crisis of evictions people are facing here in our country right now. And finally, we're going to celebrate all of our partners who have helped make this year possible, and Arm & Arm serving more people in more ways than ever before. Before we launch into our program, I'd like to take a moment to thank our events committee who helped make this possible. I'd also like to thank our platinum sponsor for tonight's event, Accenture. And also, I'd like to thank our video producer, Bob Miola, whose extraordinary work has made this happen. And now we'd like to share with you a video called The Triumph of Community, which captures amazing moments this past year in the life of Arm & Arm.
Everybody here seems to be very cooperative, and I think we work well together.
So we pack up the fruit and the protein and the cereals and the beans and tuna fish. I think it's a really well-run organization that's helping a lot of people, and it's just really nice to have a regular place to come.
Congratulations to Arm & Arm for continuing to do the important work that you're doing during this pandemic. We need you.
Arm & Arm is a key foundational element to this congregation's commitment to mission and outreach.
So what you tried to do and what you did was just keep 130 families from losing their homes, right? That represents how many children who have roofs over their heads, right, and food in their bellies.
So there is a sense of deep-rooted pride and connection and connectedness with Arm & Arm. We were one of the founders of that. Look at it go now.
I had no food in my house, no food or nothing. In the middle of my bills was high, and I didn't have no money to get no food. And I heard about you guys, and I came here. And my kids and me got fed. And I appreciate y'all so much for everything they do for me.
Because there's a lot of people are hurting now because they don't have an opportunity to have their jobs, you know, and it's the first time for some people to come out and get food like this.
It's working out really well because everyone's staying safe.
As I always say, not me today, but it could always be me tomorrow.
When COVID hit, you guys didn't miss a beat, and there was a need and a new way of doing it.
I think that there was a recognition that this was an unprecedented crisis, and the board recognized that resources were necessary in order to do the work and do the work well, especially at this time for people that were, that are much more vulnerable.
When something like the pandemic happens, you begin to see a vulnerability of some folks that you go, wow, we're a lot more vulnerable than we thought.
The focus for everybody, the board and the staff, really pivoted to dealing with food insecurity and how we would be able to not just provide more food, but provide it safely. And, we had been wrestling with the idea of mobile distribution of food for quite a long time. And suddenly we were faced with this in a way where we had to really figure it out in a hurry.
Over the years, Arm & Arm had moved from a bagged delivery model to a grocery store model, which was really humane. One of the first things that I did, went down to the pantry and people were in our market and they were choosing what they wanted to have. When the pandemic hit, of course, that was one of the most dangerous things you could do. So we quickly looked at the essential nature of our work. We knew that people needed food to continue, no matter what. We made the bold decision to be able to go to a 100% mobile delivery model. By doing it this way, we would have the best model for keeping everybody safe.
You and I were on a Zoom call early on with municipal leaders in Princeton and nonprofit leaders who were both in shock and paralyzed about what to do. And I watched as you took a lead in that conversation and were describing what Arm in Arm could do. And you were describing the move to 100% contactless delivery to those in need. It was a momentous adaptation to a crisis. And to be able to continue then and have the sustainability over this last year, almost a year, to do that, is a testament to your leadership, your staff's persistence and strength, and of course, the response of the community, not just Nassau Church, but the response of so many of those who support. And I think it will forever change Arm in Arm's imprint in the Princeton community and in Mercer County.
It's really been inspirational to see how, again, flexible the staff is, how hardworking the staff is in trying to make that a reality, all for the benefit of the people that the organization serves.
We had staff now that were lining up deliveries. We had staff that were delivering in their cars, and we had staff that were scanning our databases to make sure and calling all people that in need and saying, how can we get food to you?
What's been really interesting going remotely is that we are able to allow staff to kind of work when they need to work. You know, we have a couple of single mothers on our staff. So, you know, during school hours, you know, they're working with their kids. So then they'll do evening hours, which then helps our clients because they're doing the exact same thing.
I was so thankful to have on our board experts in medicine and healthcare. We have 2 physicians on our board that were deeply knowledgeable about best practice.
And especially right now, we are increasing the number of families that we're serving for food every single month. And that will continue for a while.
So we've gone from, as I mentioned, February, 1,995 family deliveries through nearly 100% pantry model, to May, with 2,635 family deliveries through 100% mobile delivery, to now with a 3-pronged blended delivery. Last month in December, we did over 3,300 family deliveries.
Again, I think the thing that's sort of wonderful here is just how wonderful the families are that come here. The moms with their kids, some dads.
Everyone is great, everyone is helpful, everyone loves the job, and it's really rewarding to be a part of that.
Right now, we are doing deliveries to more than 250 households twice a month. We have done and we are doing a lot, and that's because we have the support of the community.
So I work with clients who are facing eviction or in some cases are already homeless. Initially, most of the clients who were coming to us were clients who had lost their job right away, March, April, restaurant workers, school workers, bus drivers, all the sorts of people who were immediately laid off because their businesses shut down. And then for many of those people, there was a significant gap in time until their unemployment started, if it did.
Housing stability. The good news is there was an evictions moratorium in place.
At some point, the evictions moratorium that's in place is going to be lifted. And once that evictions moratorium is lifted, there are going to be a lot of people that need to get support to stay in their housing.
Well, right now, I think the number out there is that there are $70 million worth of rental arrearages for Mercer County. Mercer County. Right. $70 million.
And I know that as an organization, we've partnered with Housing Initiatives of Princeton, also with the support and assistance of Princeton Area Community Foundation, to try to get ahead of the curve on that.
What we realized in this pandemic was that we were kicking the can down the road. Having a moratorium meant that people were still having back rent stack up. And to be able to help them before they would receive an evictions notice, before the evictions moratorium would be lifted, that was our chief concern.
The court system is going to be overwhelmed with eviction notices. People owe, a lot of money, and I think that there's going to be potentially 30 to 40,000 evictions could flood the state.
One of the first things we did is we reached out to the court to talk to them about the evictions. So there are 1,400 people, which is a lot more than I thought, currently in eviction court.
People have lost their jobs. It's been problematic them getting access to their unemployment if they're eligible for unemployment. So people are really struggling to make ends meet. And now we're seeing people who owe multiple months of rent.
So we were able to create a really best practice scenario that allowed us to match funding and to do more for people in need. And we were able to help people in extremely large quantities. For instance, before the pandemic, we average help for a family was about $488. During the pandemic, we were helping people at about $1,500 per family.
The moratorium may be in place now, but many families are in arrears with rent for many months. So to be able to have a process in place to bring landlords and renters together to negotiate it, and that process is very valuable to continue. And for you to do that, you need the funding to support that. So my hope is that donors will also step up and continue to support it.
We need volunteers, and we've gotten volunteers. We could not have done this without volunteers. Arm in Arm is critically dependent upon volunteers.
They come in and they help uplift us. They help uplift the people of the community. And we're really so appreciative to have really dedicated volunteers. They greet everyone with a smile, and they're just ready to get to work.
The volunteers are a huge asset, to every program that Arm in Arm does, I believe. Whether they're giving their time and effort, kind of putting our, ideas together to do something that they have in mind. The culture of Arm in Arm is the way it is because of the great volunteers that we have.
2020 was an incredibly challenging year. I really appreciate everybody who stuck with us and worked with us, understanding the gravity of the moment. It's been really incredible to see how many people, especially with all the uncertainty, how many stakeholding organizations, partner organizations, friends, family, step forward with resources. And I want to make sure that they understand and that they know that we take that commitment on their part seriously, and we are working as an organization to make sure that those resources are effectively put to use in the community.
Number one, please continue to support this important work. And second, our gratitude. We have seen through the Princeton Area Community Foundation donors rise to the occasion as well. We've seen a big increase in gifts coming into the Community Foundation. In fact, this in 2020, we saw a 62% increase in gifts coming in and processing those gifts to make sure they go out to organizations like yours. So please continue the generosity, and thank you.
And so I hope that it has resulted in a sense of awareness, engagement, and generosity, perhaps at a level that wasn't before, and I hope that will continue after.
You need to be able to give resources to families. Families need the resources. So whatever resources that we can gather for those organizations, they use them the way that families need them to.
I think we found through the pandemic a level of generosity that I hope continues, both in dollar amounts and numbers of people who step up, because that should never wane again. Because we found out, actually, that there are more dollars for support, and there are more folks who want to help, and we shouldn't ever go back.
But I think that what this pandemic has highlighted is the issue of racial inequality, racial and economic inequality that exists, that Arm in Arm and PACF has always known it's there, and we've worked together to deal with different pieces. But in this pandemic, it's just been really highlighted, and we have to begin to examine what does it mean to add a lens of dealing with racial inequality to our work. What else do we need to do?
So I think an extension of your work and ministry is to not only provide those needs, but work to transform a society to a more just and free and equal society of possibilities for everyone.
There's always going to be challenges, but if you get together with people of good intention, you can find solutions. I mean, to me, the first lesson was the amazing goodness of humanity in the face of crisis. And I think that starts with our clients, with the people that we serve, our families that we serve.
Thank you very much for your service. I love Arm in Arm. They give out a whole lot of good stuff.
Volunteers are an absolutely critical part of Arm in Arm's mission. And especially this year during the pandemic, we needed volunteers in ways we had never experienced before. This year, when our service delivery models changed, we asked our volunteers to do things they had never done before. They were driving bags of food to their neighbors and joining together with family members to be able to come in and bag for us. So this year, we want to thank the volunteers who continued to help us. And we want to say to everybody who is going to come back to us after the pandemic, we miss you, and we want you to be a part of our work moving forward. But for now, we want to say to people who are truly heroic, thank you.
The Family Matters Award goes to you, Mary Kate Mooney. Next up, you're so kind and joyful, and you always make time to help us in the pantry, despite what's going on in your personal life. The Arm in Arm Spirit Award goes to you, Jeannie Lopez.
Thank you so much to New Jersey manufacturers. With sending your groups of volunteers and your donations, you've been able to help Arm in Arm in such a great way. Also, CSAAA, you've been able to send groups on the blink of an eye. Next up, we have Nancy Richardson. Nancy is a longtime volunteer. We've still seen her love and felt her love as she made sure if everyone was doing all right. Next up, we have Carol Moore. She made sure that she reached out and got it done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our partners, Mercer Street Friends, Trinity and Nassau Presbyterian Church of Princeton and Lawrenceville.
Thank you so much to Accenture. You've always been a great help with your donations and getting a volunteer group to come down to either of our pantries. Thank you so much to J&J. You have always been great. Next, we have PEP J&J. Thank you so much.
Okay, teamwork makes the dream work, so thank you so much to these next groups. Starbucks for sending your groups down in Trenton to come help out in our pantries. Project Freedom. Thank you so much to our Yes We Can food drive coordinators, our TCNJ and Ryder Bonners. You guys are always so eager to work.
NJEDA, thank you so much for your time and efforts. And NJDOT, we look so forward to your donations that you annually give us. Our community greatly appreciates it. Thank you all so much.
Next, we have our Volunteers of Excellence. The Bob the Builder Award goes to you, Jill Lawver. Thank you so much. Next, we have our very own special librarian. The Read Across America Award goes to you, Kim Kite. Thank you so much. The Back Like She Never Left Award goes to you, Melissa Lindsay. Thank you so much. Next, we have our Call to Duty Award, also a volunteer who was very dedicated to help us. Sahar, thank you so much for coming in and helping us. And she also became a part-time employee too, so thank you so much.
So first up, we have Ed Harris. He gets the Chief and Commander Award. and we really are thankful for Ed. We can always count on Ed Harris. Thank you. Next, we have James Maloney, also known as Jim Maloney. The Chief of Operations Award goes to him. Next up, we have our very own Hanover Gardner volunteers, Louise Sr. and Martha Ferdman. We would not be able to provide our community with fresh produce from our garden if it wasn't for you two. I like to call them the Powerpuff Sisters Award goes to Brenda and Dolores. Them two together, they're a dynamic duo.
The Supermom Award goes to you, Elizabeth White. Thank you so much. An award going out to one of our newest volunteers, Dan, who's one of the most reliable men I've ever met in my life. He comes in even in really bad weather, and he's always ready to work.
So first up, we have a trio, actually, a family. They are getting the Generation to Generation to Generation Award, and it's Venice, Venetia, and Vin. Next, the Power Couple Award goes to Don and Bev Sears. Thank you both so much for your time, effort, and also the donations that you brought in here and there during the pandemic when you came to volunteer. Next, we have Lolly O'Brien. She gets the Enthusiasm Award. No matter what she's being asked to do, she's always asking and being enthused about what to do next.
Next, we're going to announce our Evergreen Awards. Our first award goes to a longtime intake volunteer at Hudson. You've been with us through this pandemic. So the Sweet as a Treat Award goes to you, Miss Loretta Parker. Thank you so much for your contributions.
We have Chris Grabel. Chris has been a volunteer for some years now. Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate you. So next up, we have Phil Unetic. He gets the On Board and On the Board Award for Arm in Arm because he has contributed also on the board and also his time and effort in the pantries volunteering. So we thank you so much, Phil.
I volunteer because I'm called to do it through my faith. And I tell people that I know, like, forget about trying to figure out what makes you happy in life and go right for joy. And joy comes from serving others, and I found my joy at Arm in Arm.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Avila. I'm the director of the Arm in Arm Princeton site. Today, for me, it's a privilege to be able to speak about my stars. Arm in Arm shines because we depend on our stars, who are our volunteers. What will we do without our volunteers, without our donors? First, I want to let you know about this As You Wish. Carol Olivari, she is awesome. Whenever we need something, whenever we are short on some of our inventory, she's calling us and she's asking what do we need, or if we have a client who, they have restrictions on their diet, I will reach out to her and she will be there. She brings food twice a month, and we really appreciate her. I also want to highlight Princeton High School. They every year are supporting us with food drives and other donors as well. But I want to say thank you to all of you. With our volunteers, I have so many volunteers. I have Gretchen, it's our everyday volunteer. She's everywhere, she's every day here. She helps us no matter what role we need her to cover. She's gonna be there helping our clients, doing deliveries, bagging, bringing stuff. She's there, she's our strong volunteer. I wanna name Christine. Christine has been with us even before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and she's always helping us either bagging or serving our clients. So she is our welcome volunteer, and we want to offer her the Welcome Award. I want to give our 110th award to Greg. Greg belongs to Farmers Against Hunger. Greg comes every week, every Monday, with bread and some vegetables. He goes to Wegmans, and then he collects items from there. And then he comes to Princeton, and he goes to Trenton as well and drop off these baked goods and some vegetables as well. I want to say thank you to Greg. I want to give our Green Thumb Award to Vicky. Vicky is here every Tuesdays. We receive our fresh produce on Tuesdays. Vicky comes here in the morning and she prepares, she cleans, and she organizes and sorts all these fresh produce so that our clients are satisfied receiving these oranges, receiving tomatoes, cabbage, and it's because of Vicky. So thank you, Vicky. I want to highlight Ben. Ben is this teenager. I'm so proud of you, Ben. You have two qualities, humility and you're braveness. These two qualities are going to take you far away. You help us breaking down the boxes. We have 50, 60 boxes for you, waiting for you. And with your beautiful attitude, you help us every Tuesday when you see this huge mountain full of boxes. So we want to give you the Mr. Clutch award for you. To my wonderful Elizabeth White, we want to give you the Set and Go award. You're always there helping us with home food deliveries or with our grabs and goes. If I need a volunteer, I call you, and I know you're going to be there helping us, and I know you're also helping us in Trenton. So thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to all our volunteers. I won't have enough time here to say thank you to all my volunteers who come and help me. Rebecca, you have the Energy Award because and evenings on the Tuesdays when we are all tired, you bring this beautiful smile with Christine and help us to finish serving our clients the last 2 hours. So that's why all our volunteers are called stars, because we shine, but because you come and you bring that energy to us, all of you. Thank you so much for helping R&R.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the volunteers of the homelessness prevention side of the agency. And so with that being said, I want to thank Lisa, who stood at the podium at the door to screen people in and out. Laura, who took the time to really do in-depth budgeting with the clients that she saw. Helen, who just has this wealth of information that she shared with our clients and also was a very strong advocate for them. Debbie, who was is a retired social worker, so she also was an advocate for our clients and was able to share community resources with those that she saw. And Yakfa and Evelyn. So to all of them, from the Housing Stability team, I say thank you. And we miss you guys so much and can't wait to have you guys back in the midst and doing the work that you did. Thank you.
"40 years ago, Arm in Arm was born from two faith communities here in Princeton, Nassau Presbyterian Church and Trinity Church in Princeton. These communities decided to do more for people they saw in need. 40 years later, they may not have imagined that what they gave birth to would become a lifeline for people facing a pandemic. I'd like to thank the Reverend Dave Davis, Senior Pastor at Nassau Presbyterian Church, and the Reverend Paul Jeans, Rector of Trinity Church, and their communities who have been extremely generous throughout this time, both in terms of financial support and volunteer support, and also offering us space to do our work. I'd like to thank the Reverend Molly Dykstra of First Presbyterian Church in Trenton and her community. One of our pantries and our office spaces exist there at that site. And also I'd like to thank the Reverend David Choi of Graceway Presbyterian Church for their incredible support throughout this crisis. I'd also like to thank the Reverend Jeff Vamos, Senior Pastor at the Presbyterian Church of Lawrenceville. This faith community has partnered with us before, and during the crisis, they did even more. Finally, I'd like to thank all of the faith communities, without whom we could not have done the work that we accomplished. So many times you've donated food and volunteers and resources for us to be able to do our work even better. Thank you. The Arm & Arm Board of Directors are intimately involved in the work of Arm & Arm. They help volunteer, they offer financial support, and they also oversee fiduciary responsibility. One of our extraordinary board members, Laura Heil, did an amazing backpack drive to be able to help children in Trenton receive school supplies during the pandemic. This is Laura Heil.
But then the Robbins School has a special relationship with Arm & Arm. So they were in need of providing their students, 570 of them, with school supply kits. And it was presented to me, you know, hey, what do you think? And I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. So put together a registry sort of thing with how many we needed of what different items, and worked closely with Margaret to make sure that these were the things the kids mostly needed, and started having Amazon deliveries regularly for several weeks, inventoried everything, and got a group of volunteers together. We had about 12 or 15 people who assembled on my front lawn one summer evening and socially distanced, put together 570 bags with the essentials for the kids at the Robbins School. This kind of built in momentum as time went on. You know, at first it was, I put together the registry and sent out the word, and board members and other people put it on their Instagrams and on Facebook, and we promoted it, and things started rolling in. And I will say, even for me, having done that registry, the volume was quite remarkable. And keeping up with the inventory each day of opening all those Amazon boxes and counting things and making sure I knew what we still needed and was updating the registry was a lot, but it was also worth it, because the night of the packing event, the weather had been threatening all day, and we said, we're just going to go for it. And we did, and the skies remained clear, and everybody was very enthusiastic. People were also really happy to see each other, because most of us hadn't seen more than one or two people at a time, and suddenly there are 15 people. Luckily, I have a large front yard. People were spread out, so it was very safe, but it was really nice for people to see each other. And there was just great energy to the entire evening. So there was a few people, well, actually, let me just back up. There were 87 people made contributions to this drive. The total value of goods that were donated was $12,500. So that is quite remarkable that that amount was put forth with 87 donors. So every single one of those 87 donors deserves a huge thank you and thumbs up and high five. I just want to point out 4 people who I want to give a little bit special mention to. The first one is Nathalie Kassan, and she is a Montgomery Rocky Hill Rotary Club member. So she had learned about Arm & Arm when David had given a little introduction to Arm & Arm to their, to one of their meetings outdoors. And I invited the Rotary Club to come to the packing event, and Nathalie jumped right on it and said, yes, I'll be there, absolutely, and is there anything you need? And we actually were short some crayons, so on her way to help us out, she stopped and bought a whole bunch of boxes of Crayola crayons, so we were all set then. So thank you to Nathalie and to the Rotarians, because there were other Rotarians who contributed to this event. The second person I'd like to give a shout out to is Anne Disdier. Anne, I think, bought at least one of every single of the 12 items on the registry list. And some of them I'm pretty sure she bought multiples of. The next shout out goes to a threesome, which is Victor, Jacqueline, and Victoria Gibbs. They were gigantic help individually and collectively. And the last shout out I want to give is to Emily Stalin. Emily played a big role in helping me brainstorm some different ideas about how to stage the packing event, how to work some of the intricacies of the registry. And the night of the event, she was over at my house a couple hours early to help set up tables and put the inventory out on the tables so that everything would be ready once the packing volunteers showed up. So thank you so much to Emily for that huge amount of help.
While 2020 presented us challenges we had never experienced before, it also presented us support we'd never received. We were able to do extraordinary levels of service and help more people in a variety of ways because of the support that we received. And we were absolutely committed to using this support to help people as they need it. Corporations were extremely important and generous to us. Among the corporations that helped us so generously, I'd like to highlight Johnson & Johnson, BlackRock, Bristol Myers Squibb Company, PNC Bank, Berkshire Bank, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group. Foundations were such an integral part of thinking about how we can serve people in different ways. The foundations listened to our needs and they responded generously in creative new ways. Among those, I'd like to highlight, in gratitude, Princeton Area Community Foundation, the Marankas Foundation, Corella and Bertram F. Bonner Foundation, Mary Owen Borden Foundation, the Kearney Foundation, the Union Seniors Association, the Lawrence Township Community Foundation, the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund, and the Fund for Women and Girls. Finally, without the support of individuals, we could not have made this year possible. We had many longtime supporters who continued to support us and support us in ways they had never done before. And also, we had many new people join our ranks. So thank you to all of you who've become part of the Arm & Arm mission. I'd like to highlight these people. My extraordinary predecessor, Carolyn, and her husband, Paul Biondi. And also, Gordon Thomas and Deborah Howe, Elizabeth Marshall, the Blinder family, Kenneth and Naomi Young, Bill and Angela Krager, Robert and Leslie Dahl and their family foundation, William and Karen Stowe, Mark and Rachel Herr, Carol Werheim. I'd like to thank Dr. Deborah Topmeyer, one of our board of directors, and her husband, Robert Hilkert. I'd like to thank the Reverend James Armstrong, Josh and Susan Victor, William and Elaine Hayes, John and Peg Kammerer, Elizabeth Baum, Joytish and Sidhu Daniel, Brian and Paula Daniels. Hi, we have something very special for you today. In honor of Arm & Arm's 40th anniversary, we have a set of earrings donated to us by Garbo Jewelers, valued at $400. And so we're going to take the highest bidder by March 5th. Interested persons may contact Maureen Hunt by March 5th. Thank you, Garbo Jewelers. In preparation for this event tonight, I had the distinct honor to sit down and have a conversation with Dr. Matthew Desmond, professor at Princeton University and Pulitzer Prize-winning author of the book Evicted. Dr. Desmond oversees the evictions lab at Princeton University and himself is an expert on issues regarding evictions people are facing across the country. I invite you to be able to listen and to learn a little bit more about the dynamics that people are facing and also challenge us to be able to do things better with regard to public policy and how we partner to make people's lives better. There was already a crisis going on in our country with regard to evictions. Can you just speak as a kind of broad brush on what this pandemic has done to exacerbate that?
So what was it like before February and March 2020 in America? Well, we were in a situation where a lot of renters were already hurting. Their income's been flat. the last 20 years, but housing costs have basically doubled during that time for renters, and the federal government just hasn't stepped up to fill the gap. And so that means that most renting families below the poverty line were spending at least 50% of their income on housing costs. And we were passing out eviction notices, not by the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions every year, about 3.7 million eviction notices, 7 eviction notices every minute, basically. And so, so that's what it was like before the economy cratered and before we saw this massive amount of job loss and insecurity that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. What has happened since COVID hit has been both very hopeful, I think, and also very troubling. On the troubling part of it, you've seen a lot of businesses stop and jobs stop, but rents don't stop, right? The rent keeps going. So it seems like the data are showing exactly what you're seeing in day out, day in and out, that the same tenants who are always at risk of eviction are now even more at risk of eviction, because now they don't owe just, a month or two's worth of rent, they owe 3 or 4 months worth of rent. That's the bad news. The good news, or the hopeful news, is that state and federal governments have responded in historic ways. Those ways have not been perfect, they're not airtight, but the country's never had an eviction moratorium before. And when I went around the country talking about eviction or homelessness, a lot of folks were like, what can we do? It feels so hopeless. And when COVID hit, housing organizers were starting to say, we need a moratorium on eviction, and people were laughing them out of the room. And going from that place to a place where you have a federal eviction moratorium is something that I think changes our possibilities of what can and should be done to protect folks from this violence.
What's happening now to landlords in all of this? I mean, you hear about the plight of clients like ours, but how does this, because the whole system depends upon people being able to afford to be able to provide housing, the landlords themselves. What do you see happening there? Is an explosion happening on their end of people losing businesses and so forth?
On the one hand, landlords have been left out in the cold when it comes to federal response, right? Landlords were, almost all of them are ineligible for the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program, right, excuse me, that went to other small businesses. And so they were kind of left to fend for themselves, and rent relief has not been forthcoming from the federal government. On the other hand, I am a little resistant to kind of lump landlord problems in with tenant problems at this point. The foreclosure process and the eviction process operate really differently. Most landlords, if they fall behind, the bank has to wait at least 120 days to start the foreclosure process. That's really different than, a tenant falls behind, they're going to get the eviction notice within a day or two. I do think that there's kind of a false equivalency that I think is circulated in some areas of the media, where it's hard on tenants and landlords in equal measure. And I think homelessness, especially in a pandemic, is different than having a tough ride in your business, however gutting and excruciating that is. I think, like, if we take a step back, there's a time to recognize that landlord and tenant interest here are aligned, and that both of them need rent relief. Evictions aren't a solution to landlords' problems. Relief is.
Right.
I think there's also an opportunity now, and it doesn't come along very often. I mean, this might be the best shot we got, is to question the fundamentals of our system. No other country has had a public health emergency lead to an eviction emergency like us. We are the world leader in this predicament. And I think that it raises serious questions about, like, the fundamentals of this house we built.
Now, why do other countries face this differently? What about their system is different?
One thing is they've just recognized that everyone needs housing, that without stable shelter, everything else falls apart, and they've invested in that value. And so in the United Kingdom, for example, that's probably the European country most like ours, there's a right to housing. And so you can exercise that right, and the government is obliged to try to address it, just like our government has invested in 12 years of public education or social provision in old age. Other countries have invested in housing. And I remember being at a book talk once in Wisconsin, and a property owner said, if my tenants fall behind, what can I do other than evict them? And I was like, well, there's a lot of things you can do. But one thing you could do is, get to know why they fell behind and see if you can work something out. And the property owner was like, so you want me to talk to my tenants? Who do we trust and who's held accountable in this situation? So we don't trust, right, a tenant who says, I'm falling behind, I'm going to get evicted. We have to make her prove that by actually going, through this court process. But with respect to landlords, we allow landlords to evict at discretion. We do not track who the highest or lowest evicting landlords in Trenton are. We don't know the constitution of who owns our cities. And so I think that there's an imbalance of accountability and transparency here too.
I appreciate the works with the evictions lab you're doing. You're providing a lot of information that's not tracked that you mentioned. So you're picking up some of that slack there at Princeton. Are there best practices out there where they're doing a lab type practice, where they're working together with landlords and tenants in a better, let's say, more ideal way?
There's an organization in Boston called Home Start, and it discovered that it costs more for the city of Boston to execute an eviction through public housing than it does to prevent that eviction. Wow. And so it teams up with the Boston Public Housing Authority. It provides legal assistance, wraparound services, and a little bit of arrears payments. And it's had these massive returns. It's found that almost all the families that get an intervention are housed 5 years later.
What's going to happen once this moratorium is lifted? We're all kind of waiting for the sky to fall for many of our providers. What do you think?
It's very uncertain. And so what we know from the Bipartisan Policy Committee in the Senate is that we know two things. We know that $25 billion of rental assistance seems to be forthcoming. That's about a quarter of what most estimates suggest we need to kind of backfill rent arrears and stabilize families. $25 billion is a significant investment. The question is, will it be enough to stem off the tide of eviction? I think that the federal government has to act if we want to get that rent backfilled or canceled. I was thinking about the end of 2020, and it's been a terrible year on so many different levels, but it's also been an incredibly useful year to shake us out of accepting the status quo, And I think that there's a lot of things that have come into question this year, and I just hope we don't lose that either.
The answer to what's going to happen at the end of the moratorium also is dependent upon what's happening locally, right? You talked about many factors that go into this. Are there certain states or even cities that you see as ideal within our country right now that maybe are doing some things that are in an innovative way that might be replicated on a local level?
For example, in some parts of the country, if you're a corporation or LLC, you have to hire an attorney to execute your eviction. In other parts of the country, you don't. And the bottom line is, if courts make it easy for property owners to evict someone, they evict more. It's not rocket science. And so one easy thing we can do is to think, we want to make our eviction court the court of last resort, not the court of first resort. We want to make our eviction court a court where landlords come when all other options have been exhausted, not where landlords come immediately because a tenant fell behind in rent.
What would you say to people that, on just on a personal level, what can they do personally to help others during this crisis with this issue?
So years ago, my wife and I started a little nonprofit. It's called Just Shelter. And it's very simple. It's designed to answer that question. And it answers that question by directing people to local community organizations like Arm in Arm that have been in the trenches for years trying to prevent family homelessness, to prevent evictions, to preserve affordable housing. So we built a website called justshelter.org. And if people want to get involved, I encourage them to go to that and learn about the community organizations in their backyard that are doing the good work, or just simply pick a community organization and get involved with their time and maybe their money. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's the way to go. And I think that when they do that, they're going to find all sorts of innovation and inspiration on the ground level going on, just not enough funding.
Yeah, I hear that. What would you say to us? How can we be better? Organizations like us, what would you say? Are there 2 or 3 things that are best practice that we could do better?
I think the only way I can answer that question is through just a confession of real humility and thankfulness for the work you do. I think that going around the country and learning about what different community organizations have done have been incredibly, it's been incredibly moving to me and impactful, and it's really changed the way I think about America in general. Thank you for your work. One pattern that happens with respect to organizations that house people is that I think we're pretty good at talking policy, and we're pretty good at like addressing emergencies. Yes. And we're a little less good at telling stories. And I think that the storytelling part is going to be part of changing America with respect to housing and poverty.
Tell us then, what's the next project for you? What's Evicted 2? What's it going to be called? I mean, if there was ever a time when you could have a sequel to this or something that's going to be even grander, I guess, because of the pandemic, what's planned? Any ideas?
So one thing that the Eviction Lab is doing is we're partnering with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, which is a group of journalists who really focus on reporting on issues of racism and poverty and inequality, specifically by supporting the work of journalists who have experienced these problems, who are formerly homeless, for example, who have worked really low-wage jobs. And so we're supporting new research and art and poetry and documentary filmmaking on the housing crisis. We want a lot of people telling this story, including people that have experienced this hardship themselves. And so I think that that's one thing we're doing. And another thing we're doing is it's just trying to get the federal government more and more involved in the issue, not only in really investing in housing, but also investing in our knowledge, of the problem. The federal government doesn't have an eviction database. So that's kind of weird. It's weird that this ragtag group at a university has to collect data on how many people get evicted every year. This is a national crisis. It should be on the national radar. I think this is incredibly important because it allows us to design policy in the light and not in the dark. And it allows us to track things like racial disparities in eviction, or kind of understand why this city has an incredibly high eviction rate and this one doesn't, and what can be done about that. I think that, and it elevates eviction to a level of national concern, right? The government collects the poverty rate for a reason. And I think that the government collecting the eviction rate would also send a signal that this is a high national priority for us.
You are one of those good storytellers. Have there been any stories in the midst of all this that you can kind of maybe share, anecdotes from individuals that you have seen, stories of resiliency or creativity that maybe leave us with something to kind of ponder with the goodness of humanity?
I just spent about 1.5 years with a tenant organization in Minneapolis called United Renters for Justice. And they're a group of mostly poor working class folks, a lot of African American, Latino folks, some undocumented folks. They're all renters, and they decided to organize together against their property owner who seemed to be really neglectful of the building. And so they won several victories, and they found themselves turning from neighbors to a family, from strangers to people that really deeply cared about each other and were involved in each other's needs. So they organized against this landlord, and And it kind of came to a head where they decided they wanted to try to actually buy the buildings from the landlord, 5 buildings in Minneapolis.
Wow.
And the landlord said, all right, that'll be, $6 million. So the tenants set out to raise the money. And they worked with nonprofit organizations. They went on rent strike. They got a land bank to support it. And they came up with the money. Now, things came to a head where the landlord was filing evictions on everyone in these buildings, saying, I'm going to evict everyone and clear the building so I can sell them on the market. And the tenants were like saying, we have an offer for you right here. And so they could have been homeless or they could have been homeowners. And so I went to, right before the pandemic started in March, I flew to Minneapolis to see this eviction hearing, the first eviction hearing of this settlement. And there was this woman named Chloe Jackson, African-American woman, worked at the airport store when I first met her, raising a young son named Trayvon. And we were at Chloe's eviction trial and there was a recess. It was actually a jury trial. It's kind of unique. And so we're waiting for the jury to decide, and they were taking a long time. And there was a tenant sitting next to me, and her name was Takara. Takara's tough. Like, you want Takara on your side. She's got face tattoos, she's tough.
Yeah.
And she said, what's taking them so long? They're probably thinking, why do these tenants want this raggedy building? I think people have forgotten how to dream. Really convicting for me, because it was like, I spent a lot of my time thinking, what's going to get through Congress? What can we do in Trenton? What can pass the state legislature? And these tenants are thinking on a different level. They're thinking, what's ideal? What's just? What can we try? What can we dream? And Chloe won that eviction court hearing, and they got the building. The landlord sold them the building.
I can't thank you enough for ending with that, because we're now in the midst of dreaming about something that's similar to this. And so you've inspired me today to keep dreaming. Thank you so much for your time and for the work that you do and for your good thoughts about what we do. And I hope that we'll have another chance to connect soon.
And I just appreciate the work y'all do in my neck of the woods and in Mercer. And so thanks so much for everything you do. And thanks for this great conversation, David.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed tonight and you've learned a little bit and you've had a chance to celebrate with us the triumph of the human spirit in our community that's helped so many people throughout this pandemic. But I'd like to also ask you to remember all of partners like ours and be able to do all you can to support them in times of crisis like this. Thank you again for an incredible year, and thank you for considering to make Arm in Arm an essential part of your support in the coming years. Anyone who chooses to make a $250 donation to Arm in Arm will receive a copy of Matthew Desmond's Evicted. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight, and thank you so much for being a part of Arm in Arm. Truly, we are better together.
And Arm in Arm, we're better together.
I really believe that helping the homeless is my calling.
Arm in Arm, we're better together.
We are better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
When I needed food for me and my son, they've been here. Arm in Arm, we're better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
We all drive to help our community members the best that we can, and we all love our community members as well. At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
Arm in Arm, we're better together.
Demand is up like crazy. I think they're doing a fabulous job. At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
I'm fortunate enough to be here to be able to see literally hundreds of people, lives change. With Arm in Arm, we are so much better together.
At Arm in Arm, we're better together.
Arm in Arm here have
stepped up to the challenge. I'm very grateful to be a part of that. And arm in arm, we're better together.
Arm in arm, better together.
Arm in arm, we are better together.
So this pandemic has just like kind of flipped everything around, but I mean, we're still here and I think that matters. I'm here, arm in arm, we're better together.
Arm in arm, better together.
Arm in arm, we are better together forever.